So this year, we've seen Bollywood engulfed in several controversies, like remaking songs without actually giving credits to the original creators, or allegedly being accused of running a drug cartel. But in midst of all this chaos, one particular controversy has finally reared its ugly head and reached its boiling point. The controversy I'm referring to, as the video suggests, is about nepotism. But don't worry, I'm not going to waste your time stating the obvious here. I mean, asking if there is nepotism in Bollywood is like asking if Big Boss sucks. Of course, but instead, I want to focus on a different aspect in this matter. Why now, after all these years of blindly following the tradition of loving Bollywood, of flocking into the theatres upon the releases of movies, why now have we finally decided to voice our frustration? And so if you're curious to find out the answer, then you might want to stick around till the end. So let's get to it then. So to answer the first question, that why now have we reacted the way we did, we need to go back a little. We need to go back to the origin of nepotism. Let me take you to the Roman Empire in the 14th century. The religious head of Catholic Church were known as popes. The Pope was very powerful as the king, but he had one weakness. He was not allowed to procreate and have his own family. And so what the Pope would do is appoint his nephews in positions of prominence, and so he's able to retain power and assert dominance. This will later go on to be known as the first recorded case of nepotism, but it surely isn't the last. A similar trend is followed throughout the history. There are countless and countless of examples of so many countries implementing the concept of nepotism for choosing successors of the kings, and that's how dynasties were built. And although today there are no kings and rulers, but if you see, our politics is actually run by family-owned parties, and our business industry is dominated by family-owned companies. In fact, I remember back when I was in business school, half the kids out there had parents who had their own companies, and so all they had to do was go ahead and join their parents. And so it would appear that why should Bollywood be any exception? And if you break nepotism down, the reason why it's so looked down upon by people is because at the core of it, what it means is that certain people are entitled to certain advantages just because of the family they were born in. And especially in a country where the gap between classes is so wide apart, you can understand why people are growing resentful against the industry. Or so I thought, until I came across this particular interview by actor Suniel Shetty, which I must admit completely changed my perspective on looking at the situation altogether.
Nobody gave me a break. I wasn't a part of the industry. He's from South Bombay. I was a part of South Bombay, where we looked at cinema only in theatres. I hadn't even gone into a studio in my life. So it's my journey that I created. And if my child is getting an opportunity, why would anybody object?
But he makes sense, doesn't he? I mean, if you think about it, if I had a parent who is in Bollywood and I had Karan Johar for an uncle and I had the face of Varun Dhawan, then wouldn't I want to be cast in a movie? I mean, wouldn't my father want him to launch me in a movie? Wouldn't you? And forget Bollywood for a second. If you were a parent and you were in a position of power, whichever field or industry it may be, if your son or daughter expressed their interest in entering that field, wouldn't you try to make their journey a little bit easier? Wouldn't you try to help them out? And the reason you would do that is because it is embedded in our DNA to do so. It is an evolutionary trait of human beings to care more about their kins, their family, their blood than the world at whole. It is who we are. And so if nepotism is something we personally would end up being guilty for, if we were in their situation, then is it really fair to be angry about it? And that's why I feel that the reason of frustration is actually something else. And so in my humble opinion, I think there are primarily two reasons why we are reacting the way we are. The reason number one is options. If you think back 10, 20 years ago, Bollywood movies were structured in a very particular way. They were catered to the enjoyment of public in theatres, and they heavily depended on the star power of the actors in the movie for achieving box office success. But In the last few years, we've seen the rise of actors like the late Irfan Khan, Nawaz, Rajkumar Rao, Ayushmann Khurrana, and so many more. What that gave us was options, and these options have led to a change in the palette of what Indian audience likes from Bollywood. Because of these options, we can get movies with good actors who do justice to the character and respect the art of filmmaking. And so the option between choosing someone who's actually good at the art and choosing someone who's below average, the Indian audience has made its choice. They want to see artists and not stars anymore, so that the audience feels that this is actually paisa vasool. Which actually brings me to my second reason, the increase in price of tickets. Now I know on the surface this looks like a very small concern. I mean, what's a couple of $100? But if you think about it, in the last few years, going to watch a movie in a theater is no longer just about watching a movie in theater. It's an event in itself. Not only does it require money, but it also requires commitment of time. And this can be a little bit challenging for a lot of people, given that our country's purchasing power is not that high. But bringing my first reason into this, here as well we see availability of options. In the sense, movies are no longer just a product you consume in a theater. There are other modes of consumption, whether it's your mobile phone or your TV. And as I mentioned before, earlier movies were created in such a way to cater that particular audience sitting in the theater. And with the recent rise of Indian web series and Indian web movies, we've seen so many artists and so many creators do such a great job. And most of these people were relatively unknown or lack a certain star power, but still people love it. And so when you put all of this together, the real problem is not with nepotism. Because we know there are actors like Hrithik, Ranbir, Akshay Khanna, Kareena Kapoor who are Nepo kids, but they still do the job. They still perform. And so our grief is not with the fact that they're born with a silver spoon, but our grief is with the fact that they are not good enough for us to pay so much money. They're not good enough for us to retain our attention for 2.5 hours. And that's where the grief is. And so this brings me to the conclusion. What is it that we as an audience can do to bring a change into this industry? Well, Bollywood may be the industry of entertainment, but it's still a business nonetheless. And like every business, it's all about the profit line. And so it doesn't really matter how much we complain about nepotism or how much we crib about not seeing these particular actors in movies. It doesn't really make a difference, because at the end of the day, if the producer is still making money off of it, why would he change? Regardless of how bad the product is, as long as the company makes money, they have absolutely no motivation to implement change. And so if you really want to bring change, there's one thing we can do. Instead of boycotting Bollywood masala movies altogether, we need to start supporting other movies that have relatively lesser known cast. Try to make an effort to find out and watch movies that are flying under the radar, because that's the only way we can actually send the message to the industry that this is the kind of movies we want, that this is the kind of product we want. Because unless the producers start experiencing making money off of these kind of movies, they really wouldn't want to change the way things are right now. And so it's our responsibility to do what's needed, to go support these actors, these creators, these artists. And as these artists grow, automatically the industry will change. Automatically the bad actors will get replaced by better actors. And it will no longer be about star power. It will just be about good acting.